Every call you take, every message you reply to, it's theft. Theft of your time, your focus, your power. Carl Jung knew this long before the rest of the world caught on. The truth is brutal. The less available you are, the more dangerous you become. Not because you're playing games, but because you're signaling one thing loud and clear. I control my time. I control my mind. I control my life. The average man spends 17 minutes a day in real solitude. Power players carve out over 4 hours. Not for rest, but to sharpen themselves into weapons. This isn't luxury, it's survival. It's not a trick, it's psychology. The human brain craves what it can't have. When you disappear, when you withdraw into silence, your absence becomes louder than any words. Suddenly, you're not an option. You're a force. Think about it. The rarest things command the highest value. Gold, time, genius. Jung didn't waste his energy on distractions. He retreated into his mind, studied the depths of the unconscious, and emerged with insights that changed the world. He wasn't avoiding people. He was building something they couldn't ignore. This is the paradox of influence. The less you seek it, the more it finds you. Stop being the person who's always on call. Stop trading your solitude for scraps of attention. The moment you prioritize your growth over their approval, two things happen. The wrong people fade away, and the right ones, the ones who recognize your worth, start to lean in. The modern world will try to keep you addicted to availability, to notifications, to instant replies. But power doesn't come from being accessible. It comes from being indispensable. Jung's legacy wasn't built on how often he showed up. It was built on what he brought when he did. So ask yourself, are you filling the silence with noise just to feel seen? Or are you cultivating something deeper? Something that doesn't just ask for attention, but demands it? Because here's the truth. When you stop being available, you don't disappear. You transform. And that's when everything changes. The question isn't whether to pull back, it's how to do it without losing yourself in the process. And that's where most men fail. Because pulling back isn't about disappearing, it's about strategic presence. Jung didn't isolate himself to hide. He did it to reconstruct his mind on his own terms. Most men make the mistake of thinking solitude means weakness. They fear being forgotten. But the opposite happens. When you stop scattering your energy, you become magnetic. People sense the shift before you even speak. Your silence carries weight. Your no carries authority. And when you do engage, it's deliberate. This is the difference between reacting and choosing. The average man is trapped in a cycle of responses. Texts, demands, expectations. The man who understands Jung's principle, he decides when to enter the arena. He controls the rhythm. That's how you turn solitude into a weapon. But here's where men get stuck. They mistake withdrawal for passivity. Jung didn't sit in his cabin waiting for the world to notice him. He worked. He studied dreams, archetypes, the shadows most men run from. His retreat wasn't avoidance, it was a forge. And when he emerged, he didn't just have theories, he had answers people were desperate to hear. So ask yourself, what are you building in the silence? If you vanished for 6 months, would you return with something valuable or just an inbox full of unanswered messages? The goal isn't to ghost the world, it's to return to it as someone stronger. This is the alchemy of masculine energy. Withdraw to advance. Listen to dominate. Stop asking for permission to exist on your terms. The moment you do, the world starts negotiating, not the other way around. Because power isn't taken, it's demonstrated. And right now, the most radical act is this. Let them wonder where you've gone. Let them question what you're doing. While they're guessing, you're already 3 moves ahead. But this only works if you master one non-negotiable rule: the difference between solitude and stagnation. And most men confuse the two, the critical difference between solitude and stagnation. Most men retreat, but they don't rebuild. That's the fatal error. Jung didn't vanish into the void. He withdrew to reconstruct his mind. His absence wasn't weakness. It was recalibration. Picture this. While the world spun in chaos, Jung spent 18 months locked in his own psyche, sketching, journaling, confronting demons. When he re-emerged, he didn't just talk about change, he embodied it. Now here's how you forge your own withdrawal timeline. Days 1 to 7. Total blackout. No social media, no distractions. Let the world wonder. Let them feel your absence. Days 8 to 21. Deep work mode. Study, train, build skills. Go silent. Sharpen your mind while everyone else scrambles for attention. Days 22 to 30. Strategic return. Speak less, but with precision. Set boundaries with action, not words. Let your presence feel sharper, like a blade. This isn't disappearing, it's recalibrating. It's withdrawing with purpose so you return stronger, clearer, and impossible to ignore. Here's the brutal truth. If your solitude doesn't make you uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. Withdrawal isn't about comfort. It's about confronting what your distractions helped you avoid. The doubts, the unrealized potential, the hard questions you've been drowning out with noise. This is the masculine crucible. No distractions, no validation, just you and the work that matters. But here's what separates the men from the boys: the ability to sit in that fire and not look for an exit. Most crumble after 3 days without external approval. Their discipline is a performance. Their solitude is an act, not Jung. He documented his descent into the unconscious like a scientist, observing, analyzing, transmuting fear into insight. That's the model. Withdraw not to escape, but to return armed with what you discovered in the dark. So when you pull back, ask yourself, are you running from something? Or are you hunting something greater? The first is weakness. The second is strategy. The world doesn't reward men who hide. It rewards men who prepare. And preparation happens in the silent spaces between battles, studying, training, sharpening your mind like a blade. That's why the ancient Stoics, the samurai, the great thinkers all shared this ritual. Strategic withdrawal, followed by, they understood what modern men have forgotten. Visibility without substance is noise. But substance forged in silence? That's power waiting for its moment. This leads to the ultimate test, because the moment you resurface, they'll try to drag you back into their games. Here's how to stay untouchable. Here's where most men fail. They return too soon. Or worse, they return the same. Jung didn't just study his shadows, he weaponized them. When he stepped back into the world, he carried something new. Insights that cut through the noise. That's the difference between disappearing and strategic recalibration. The moment you resurface, they'll test you. Old acquaintances will probe for weakness. Distractions will repackage themselves as opportunities. This is the critical phase, where your solitude either becomes leverage or gets wasted. The 2 lies that keep you available. 1. If I'm always present, they'll respect me. 2. If I disappear, I'll be forgotten. Both are false. Presence without purpose breeds contempt. Absence with strategy breeds curiosity and respect. It's human nature. What's scarce becomes valuable. The man who withdraws doesn't become invisible. He becomes intriguing. People lean in, wondering why you're no longer scrambling for their attention. But here's the secret most men miss. Withdrawal isn't passivity. It's strategy. Jung's silence wasn't an escape. It was a forge. Every minute spent in solitude, refining himself, sharpened his mind and his presence. When he re-entered the world, he wasn't just present, he was undeniable. History's most formidable men mastered this rhythm. Nietzsche in the Alps, Miyamoto Musashi in his cave, Steve Jobs in his wilderness years. They didn't hide, they incubated. And when they returned, the world had to adjust to their standards, not the other way around. This is the ultimate power move. Let your absence speak first. Let your presence confirm it. Because transformation isn't announced. It's demonstrated through undeniable contrast. But there's one psychological trigger that forces people to recalibrate how they see you. It's called the black hole effect. Here's what happens when you master strategic absence. You stop emitting desperate energy signals. Like a black hole in space, you become impossible to ignore precisely because you don't seek attention. The human brain is wired to investigate silence more aggressively than noise. Jung knew this. His years of isolation didn't diminish his influence, they compounded it. How the black hole effect works. Gravitational pull through scarcity. When you're constantly available, you're white noise. When you disappear and return with value, you create intellectual gravity. People orbit you without being told to. Light-bending mystery. Partial revelations about your transformation, that 10% rule, act like event horizons. The closer people get, the more they realize there's depth they can't fully see. Inevitable collision with value. Unlike fake aloofness, real black hole energy comes from stacking tangible skills. When you finally speak, your words carry the mass of everything you've absorbed in silence. After the 2008 NBA Finals loss, Bryant vanished. No interviews, no social media had it existed. He reappeared months later with a championship-caliber physique. New post moves dissected from 1970s game tape, a psychological edge that terrified opponents. He didn't announce his work. His game did. This is how you weaponize absence. Disappear during your upgrade cycle. Re-emerge only when you can demonstrate irreversible change. Let observers connect the dots themselves. The black hole effect isn't about manipulation. It's about the unavoidable physics of earned respect. The more substance you create in the dark, the more powerfully life bends toward you in the light. But there's a dangerous flip side to this power. The moment you taste this level of control, one primal instinct will try to sabotage everything. The sabotage instinct. When power scares you more than failure. Here's the brutal paradox no one talks about. The moment you start wielding real influence, your own mind will beg you to self-destruct. Jung called it the shadow backlash, that subconscious urge to sabotage rising authority when it conflicts with your old identity. You've felt it before. That inexplicable mistake right before a breakthrough. The sudden urge to keep things casual when respect starts growing. The impulse to explain away your progress as luck. This isn't coincidence, its psychological immune response against your own evolution. The crab bucket reflex. Your nervous system mistakes growth for danger because it's wired for tribal survival. Standing out once meant getting exiled. That ancient fear still whispers, better to be safe and small than powerful and alone. The imposter's bargain. When you start operating at higher levels, part of you waits for real adults to call your bluff. Da Vinci battled this, leaving masterpieces unfinished because perfect potential felt safer than acknowledged mastery. The comfort of known hierarchies. Even oppressive familiarity feels safer than undefined power. Nietzsche warned about this. Most would rather will nothingness than not will at all. Translation. People prefer miserable certainty over the terror of freedom. How the masters beat it. Tesla's anchor method. When his visions grew too revolutionary, he physically anchored himself to reality through mathematical repetition, solving the same equations daily until the tremors of genius became workmanlike. Marcus Aurelius' preemptive strike. He journaled his fears at dawn, exposing their pettiness before they could metastasize. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. The Navy SEAL. Rule of thirds. When your mind screams to quit, first third is physical limits. Second third is emotional resistance. Final third is where the real fight begins. This is the final gatekeeper before true sovereignty. The black hole effect gives you power, but only by walking through this fire do you earn the right to keep it. Now we arrive at the deciding factor, the single discipline that determines whether you'll crumble under this weight or turn it into your foundation. The deciding factor, sovereign rituals. Power doesn't collapse from external pressure. It leaks through unsealed cracks in your daily habits. What separates those who sustain mastery from those who flame out? Non-negotiable daily rituals that transform resistance into infrastructure. The 3 pillars of sovereign rituals. The cortisol reset. Physical anchoring. 5:47 a.m. cold plunge. No exceptions. 36 minutes of Zone 2 cardio with 0 distractions. Tactical hydration. Sea salt plus lemon before caffeine. Why it works. Floods the body with endogenous dopamine before the world can hijack your neurochemistry. Tesla's equation-solving ritual updated for the modern mind. 2. The Shadow Council. Mental warfare. Each morning, confront one of these questions in writing. What am I pretending not to know? Jungian shadow work. Where am I being strategically stupid to avoid responsibility? Peterson's brutal honesty. What would the man I need to become do next? Aurelius' preemptive strike. Kobe's 4 a.m. Ghost workouts weren't about fitness. They were psychological dominance over his own laziness. 3. The controlled burn, energy management. 11:03 a.m., 1:43 p.m. Sacred work block, phone in Faraday cage. Sunset accountability. 3-minute voice memo reviewing today's integrity breaches. 9:17 p.m. glycine plus magnesium ritual, not sleep hygiene, neurochemical warfare. This isn't discipline, it's operational leverage. The Navy SEAL who survives Hell Week doesn't have more willpower, he has better systems. The CEO who outlasts market crashes doesn't have supernatural stamina. She has fail-safes engineered into her daily architecture. The ultimate test. For the next 17 days, implement just one of these pillars exactly as written. Document the resistance that arises. It will. Observe how your brain tries to negotiate. This isn't about productivity. It's about installing the circuitry of sovereignty. Which brings us to the uncomfortable truth about lasting power. It's not what you gain, but what you stop recovering from. There are two types of men in this world. Those who try to change, and those who cross the line where not changing becomes impossible. This isn't about motivation. It's about reaching the point of no return, where your old self feels more foreign than the man you've become. The 3 markers of irreversible change. 1. Cognitive dissonance turns against your past. You'll catch yourself thinking, I used to argue about this. Old vices don't just lose appeal. They feel embarrassing, Jung's insight. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. 2. External resistance becomes fuel. When critics attack, you'll notice something strange. Their words don't land. Why? Because their insults describe someone who no longer exists. Like Nietzsche said, you must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. 3. Withdrawal becomes your default state. Not as avoidance, as recalibration. You'll crave solitude like a craftsman craves his workshop. Because now you know, true power isn't taken from others. It's forged alone. The ultimate test, when you wake up one morning and realize the opinions that once crushed you now sound like static. The distractions that hooked you now seem juvenile. The person in the mirror operates by a code no one can violate. That's when you'll know. You didn't just change, you rewrote your operating system. But this raises one final question. What do you do when you're no longer recognizable to the person you started as? That's where the real work begins.